Welcome to the Wife of Violence podcast, where we dive deep into topics of personal growth, passion, and leadership, all with violence on our mind. I'm Amber, I'm the wife.
I am Ryan, I'm the violence.
And this morning we both woke up and chose violence.
Every day.
All right, well, we are on month 2 of the podcast, and I'm really excited. It's been a fun experience so far. We're continuing to try to improve our production, improve our audio quality, and we have a lot of other things that we want to do along the way. Just want to thank you guys for sticking with us and let you know that there's going to be a little shift in the topics for this next quarter of the season is how we're looking at it. So, are you ready to get started?
Always.
Well, good. On this episode, we are putting pressure on the passerbys as we break down the bystander effect and what it means for you as a potential victim or as an altruist. So let's do it.
Let's do it.
I think it's important to consider what helped popularize the bystander effect for this conversation. And it happens to be the murder of Kitty Genovese in New York City back in 1964. It ended up leading to some social studies conducted by psychologists. And the full story of Kitty and her killer is really pretty cool if you're a true crime fan. So I'd encourage you to seek out your favorite true crime podcast, give it a listen. I'm going to give a very abridged, zoomed in version on the recount of events. I was really excited doing this episode to go to Murderpedia. We're pretty big true crime fans, Ryan more so than I am, but I've listened to a good few podcasts myself, and I've heard Murderpedia referenced. So it's like a Wikipedia for true crime. I was really excited to go there and get some details. It was fine. I still ended up back on Wikipedia regardless. So the first attack that Kitty happened upon, she was parking in her apartment building, and the killer ran up and stabbed her from behind, and she screamed. And lights came on in the apartment complex, and a neighbor allegedly yelled, "Let that girl alone," and the killer ran and allegedly drove off. I'm going to use the word allegedly a lot because this was the 60s. There's a lot of different accounts of what happened, and there was a really over-sensationalized New York Times article that came out about it. So allegedly is just the safe way to talk about it.
Yeah.
So that alone right there, I feel like there's a chance that this could have been okay for her. I mean, she's stabbed, she's injured, but it got some people's attention. But again, this was 1964. It's not like they were just grabbing their cell phones.
Right.
They couldn't even use their house phones to call 911. Yeah. They would have to get to an operator, figure out the number, get connected. Like there was still a lot of steps that would go into calling and getting her help.
Yeah. I think the story kind of led to
it did
the development of 911. Yeah.
There were a few things that came out of it, and one of them was the development of 911. So nothing happened. Purportedly, no one did anything at that point other than yelling out the window, and then as the commotion died down, he ran off. Neighbors went back to sleep. But he returned for the second attack 10 minutes or so later, based on the accounts I saw, and went looking for her. He checked the parking lot, he checked a nearby train station, eventually found her almost unconscious in the apartment lobby, continued to attack her in many ways before running off. Yep. This whole event, and I'm not sure if it was this second half lasted 30 minutes or if the entire thing together lasted 30 minutes, meaning 20 minutes of being attacked, but it's a 30-minute endeavor.
Yeah.
And so witness responses when police came by and did their investigation were things like, well, I didn't want to get involved. And her killer was even asked, was he worried about witnesses? And he said, well, I knew they wouldn't do anything. People never do.
Yeah.
And so the results that came out of this were the 911 call, as we mentioned, but also Good Samaritan laws. If you try to help somebody, you're going to be okay. You're protected by these Good Samaritan laws, even if you can't help them, that sort of thing. They're not entirely widespread, but they started becoming more and more common. So there's a lot in here. And this is what popularized the bystander effect, was looking at this response. So I'm going to have you start off talking about where we see bystander effect and what we do. And then I'm going to tie it back to what we see in this case and in other situations.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting. I think in this case, and I don't know if this is a real thing, and you for those of you that don't know, Amber does actual research and work, and I just sit here and listen to her talk, and then I say things that come to mind if They do.
For those not watching, I have a laptop in front of me, and he has a cup of tea.
Yes.
There you go. That's what it is.
That was the bulk of my prep work, was making sure that I had a cup of tea. I think there's a thing called bystander apathy as well, and it's kind of a version of what happens with bystander effect, and to me, that's what it sounds like happened in the Kitty case, where it's like, not my problem, basically.
Yeah.
I am apathetic to whatever is happening in here. It doesn't affect me, so I'm not going to get involved in it.
That's like a big umbrella that is broken down even further in these different things.
Okay. So in our world, bystander effect, we kind of approach it from two different places. One, when something happens, and if we use an active killer event as an example, the general consensus of most people is, and I think the larger the group, the more likely this is to happen. The general consensus is there's somebody else here more capable, more qualified to deal with this situation than I am. And so I'm going to wait until that happens. Somebody is going to do something, as opposed to thinking, well, I'm somebody.
Yeah. So that's diffusion of responsibility.
Okay.
More people around, you feel less personally responsible. And there was an argument made that if less people were around, she may have lived, because if it's just one person, then that person may know, well, I'm the only one she has as an option. I have to help this person. And that's the social experiments that were done off of this attack were on that nature. And they had people in different rooms as a part of a big discussion, but they were all in the same building in different rooms. And some participants were told there were other people in other rooms. And then some people were told they were the only one. It was this person and another person on the call. So there were varying degrees of bystanders involved. And one of the people on the call had like an epileptic episode. They had mentioned that they were epileptic or whatever. And so there's in this discussion, again, different rooms, microphone, that sort of thing. And the person would act out distressed and ask for help and that sort of thing. And when the person thought they were the only other person in the room, there's cameras and hallway cameras. They'd come out, go looking for help, asking for help from somebody, checking in different offices, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But when there were multiple other people, they weren't as likely to do that.
Yeah.
And there's a ton of experiments just like that I could reference. But yeah.
So I have a story. This just made me think of it, and I think it will make sense here. It may tell more about me than probably should. So when I was a kid, my brother and I road tripped to Alaska with my grandparents. Mm-hmm. And so for those of you that don't know, I'm in North Carolina. I've been in North Carolina pretty much my whole life. Road tripping from North Carolina to Alaska is quite an endeavor. This would be mid 80s. We're in a very typical conversion van at the time, living the life, hitting the KOA campgrounds on the way. And I don't remember where we were exactly, but we're going down the interstate, and there's a car on the side of the road, and you can see two guys, and one is holding like a floor mat, and is shaking it, and it's on fire.
Oh.
And
he's shaking it?
Yeah. So my granddad pulls over, and the car essentially is on fire. And so my granddad offers to give them a ride. In mid 80s, I mean, it wouldn't be uncommon for somebody to pick up somebody on the side of the road or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's two young guys. I would say they were early to mid 20s. My granddad is driving. One of the guys we picked up is sitting in the front passenger seat, and this is a conversion van, so you've got like some captain's chairs and then almost like a couch in the back and whatever. And so my grandmother and my brother are sitting kind of in the same row as the second guy. I get behind him, where there's like almost like a couch kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And so this is the summer between 4th and 5th grade. Okay. So however old you are at that point. So again, we've been road tripping, picking up things here and there, gift shops along the way, hitting all the sites and whatever. And at some point, my brother had picked up like a bullwhip, like a one that a kid would have, you know. And so I'm behind this guy, and I've got this bullwhip in my hand.
Sure.
And I've got it to where it's kind of looped a little bit. Because in my head, I'm thinking, all right, the guy in the front, my granddad can handle him. If something goes sideways, my granddad can handle him. My grandmother, listen, I've seen my grandmother two-hand choke an emu before. So she's very tough. I think she would probably be okay. But I'm thinking, I just don't know.
Yeah.
And I'm literally thinking, okay, if something goes sideways, I'm going to throw this loop over his head and just let my weight hang. And I honestly and I know this is a long way to get to the point is, if there had been 2, 3, 4 other people in that van, I don't think as a 9 or 10-year-old, I would have ever thought, would have
taken it on yourself.
I might need to do something here,
right.
You know? One more story, and this is a quick one. I just saw, it's crazy because I just saw this. It was a video on Twitter, and if I think about it, I'll send it to you so you can put it on Instagram.
Yeah.
It looks like a state fair kind of thing.
Okay.
And so it's one of these rides where people sit in I don't know, it's a bunch of people sit in one kind of row, and the whole thing kind of circles around.
Oh, okay.
So it's on like a big arm.
It's not the boat that flips over, but it goes
all the way up.
You're facing the same direction the whole time. But
yes.
It's all the way up. And okay, yeah.
So at some point, somebody's videoing, and at some point, you can tell the base of this thing is starting to become dislodged.
Oh my gosh.
It's starting to move. And there's a lot of people around. And then you start seeing a bunch of people film, and you see one guy run over and grab it and put his weight on it, which would have done absolutely nothing.
No.
However, once he did, even people that were filming, like obviously the one person that's still filming keeps filming. Yeah. But you can see people in the foreground that are filming that are all of a sudden like, this is what I should be doing. Yeah. And so you see a whole crowd of people after this one guy goes. You see a whole crowd of people run over and put their weight on this thing and try to hold it down. That is a great example, a very visual, obvious example of what we talk about in the active killer side of things, where it's very difficult to be first, and most people are not willing to be first. But once somebody goes, other people are much more willing to act and get involved. And I don't think it's apathy in most cases.
No,
I think in most cases it's, I don't know what to do. Other people are more qualified. I don't want to get in the way.
Yeah. So the things you're saying are these mental gymnastics that we go through that lead us to these strands of the bystander effect. And what you're describing, what happened there was social influence. As individuals, we monitor the behavior of people around us to determine how to act.
Yes.
And so you need that person who's able to think for themselves individually, probably had somebody they loved on that thing that was going to go do whatever it took.
Yeah.
And then everybody else sees this behavior, and luckily for us can make those connections of, oh, that can help, let's all go do that.
Right.
Yeah. So that's a great example where we need this for human behavior. It's not, we're saying, oh, it's bad if you monitor the behavior around you and no one's doing anything, so you don't do anything.
Right.
I mean, that doesn't look good when somebody needs help, but it's a necessary human behavior. And we talk about gray man in terms of self-defense situations, acknowledging what the group around me looks like. And I have to make a choice. Am I going to fit in so that I can go with the crowd and not be signaled out? Or if I'm going to stand out, do I do it in just a big way and go for it?
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting because another study I came across was in the National Library of Medicine article I found, and they did a functional MRI study mapping neural activity. So these participants were in an MRI machine, and they had this okay. So they had a virtual reality simulation set up where they watched an elderly lady collapse, and the variable that they changed across each scenario were how many bystanders were around. So as the number of bystanders increased, there was an increase in activity in the areas of brain related to visual attention and perception. So there's more people around, they're paying attention, they're more alert, they're watching what's going on. But as the number of bystanders increased, there was a decrease in activity in brain regions important for the preparation to help, to go do something. We literally have less brain activity that's going to help get us moving when we see other people around, especially not moving.
Yeah, that does not surprise me at all.
Isn't that wild?
Again, to relate it back to what we do when we teach courses for active killer stuff, one of the things that we tell people is, look, the 10 or 12 people that are in this course, however many are in this course, you, by choosing to be here, are probably in the group of people that are going to be more willing to act. Just by virtue of you making the choice to learn some options, some things that you can do to make other people safe, you're probably more likely to act in a real situation. So when you're acting, be willing to tell other people what to do.
They literally need that help.
Yes.
Their brain isn't doing it. You tell them.
You come hold this here. You come put pressure on this wound. You call 911. You barricade that door, whatever it is. And most people, and honestly, what you're saying right now leads me to believe that they will do it without even thinking about it.
Yep.
It's truly just going to be, well, this person is taking charge. They're telling me what to do. They seem like they know what they're talking about. I'm not even thinking about what they're saying. Here's my phone, 911.
Because your perception is there.
Yeah.
You literally have this wherewithal to see and hear and respond, and you're paying attention, but the part of your brain that needs to go isn't there.
Yes.
So when you get that input, it's, oh, okay, there we go.
Yes.
One of the other arguments you mentioned was this expertise idea. The expertise argument is a part of diffusion of responsibility, where this idea is, well, somebody else is more capable of handling this than I am. And we talked about automation of flights last episode, 2 episodes ago. And it came up in research, this idea of having autonomous cars, self-driving cars, where you're in the passenger seat. If something goes wrong, you're less likely to do something about it because, well, this car is the expert. It has more wherewithal to know what to do than I do. Right. Even if you're about to drive into a ditch or off a road, it's hard to fight that expertise argument, even in something so obvious like that.
Yeah.
So it's important to get moving and do something. Another thought process that goes through our head is, well, maybe it's not a big deal. Maybe I don't need to do something. And that calls back to social influence because we're monitoring the behavior of other people. Well, if they're not jumping and running and doing this, that, or the other, maybe I don't need to do it. And I don't want to risk looking stupid by jumping to conclusions and acting. Right. And that's
I don't want to be embarrassed.
Yeah. And that's pluralistic ignorance, if you needed a term for it. I know you don't. No. Maybe your audience would.
Yeah. There's probably people out there that are more intellectually curious than I am.
That's me raising my hand. But yeah, recognizing that these thoughts are normal.
Yes.
These are actual things. They are studied and observed on a scientific level, and then realizing them to where you can make decisions, understanding how you're trying to fight what your impulses are.
Right. But also, just because something is normal doesn't mean that we should necessarily accept it.
Right.
It's like, well, in self-defense, there are things that are intuitive, instinctual, that do not help us. Actually do the opposite.
Yeah.
And so that's where training becomes important. So if I know that I'm a person that freezes under pressure, or I'm a person that kind of shuts down when things go sideways, or I'm the kind of person that struggles to problem solve in real time, those are things you can work on.
Yeah.
Those are things that you can train and work past. They are normal. Yes, absolutely. And there are people that are more inclined to act when things that's why you have people in certain professions that when bullets are flying, everybody else is running away and they're running towards that does take a certain kind of mindset and mentality and personality, but that doesn't mean that some of these things can't be enhanced and honed and improved.
Yeah. And when it comes to violence, I think Maslow's hierarchy of needs starts coming into play, where before I can worry about the group and other people, I have to make sure I'm taken care of.
Yes.
And so if you've never thought of, trained in, experienced in some way this type of event, you can't ensure your own safety. You can't move to the action stage.
Right.
Even if you do hard things, even if your life is something where you should be the one to act and do something, you have to experience it. You have to have been there.
Right.
And so once I can, and still you might not, it's hard to really know what you're going to do in that situation.
Yeah.
But if I know I can protect myself, if I understand some dynamics of what's going on, I can move to that next level of protecting a group.
Yeah. Well, and it's you're on an airplane, the cabin becomes depressurized. You put your mask on first, right?
Yeah.
You need to make sure that you're going to stay conscious in order to be able to help other people. And this is a similar idea, and a lot of this can be done on the front end, right? We talk all the time. What is the variable that I truly control?
Right.
That's me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Me,
Yourself.
my actions, my reactions to external stimulus. That's all I really control. So when it comes to prep time or working on improving, getting better, whatever, I have control of that. That's something that I can manage to a degree, by putting in the time, whether it's on the mats or, on my laptop doing research, whatever it is, that's something that I control. That's something that I can ultimately affect.
That training allows you to recognize these situations faster and start acting. Delaying or shortening that gap between seeing and acting, because our brains recognize patterns, and we mentioned that before.
Mm-hmm.
We want to see things, fit them into a pattern that we know, and be able to understand what's happening. And when extreme situations like this happen, we're slow to recognize that it's an exception, that it's not what usually happens. Yeah. And we have to get our brain through that process and then look to act. And something that Amanda Ripley looks at in her book, The Unthinkable, Who Survives When Disaster Strikes and Why. And it's just that. There's being slow to recognize exceptions, and then there's the peer pressure factor, where we don't want to risk social embarrassment and overreact, and we err on the side of underreacting, and this behavior can be a detriment to us.
Yeah, and it's wild how greatly we can be affected by the behaviors and actions of people around us.
Yeah.
When again, whatever value that has is only because of what we attribute to it.
Right.
Realistically, it has no value in terms of what I can do. I just make the choice to let it. Well, I don't know how conscious a choice it is. But I make the choice to allow those behaviors to affect my action or inaction. And recognizing that that's a real thing, I think, is important. Because sometimes you may not even realize why you're doing things or not doing things.
It's crazy that it's just some stranger that happens to be near us, and instinctively we're drawing off of what they're doing. Yeah. When if maybe I knew that person, I may have known before, like, oh, they're not going to do anything. When we do active shooter response training in our vernacular, active killer defense, we tell people, groups, especially where groups have been told they are doing this training, look around, look at who's involved, look at who's acting, look at who's committing to this. They're more likely the ones who are going to be there and who are going to help, and you should take your cues from.
If you're not taking action in the training, I can pretty much guarantee when shots are being fired, that's not the person to rely on.
It's crazy because it comes back to another topic closely related to the bystander effect, a little different. It's called the volunteer dilemma. And when you look at it and think about, like, a group at church or whatever, a volunteer group at your local food bank, it's easy to calm it down. But then I'm going to kick it back over to Active Killer, where the volunteer dilemma is in a group of people. There are chores to be divided up, and if it's something regularly among the group, it's pretty easy to do. If somebody has to clean the kitchen, somebody has to clean the bathroom, somebody has to do this, and it happens daily, weekly, whatever it is, it's easy to rotate through. And it's simple. Everyone does a bit of the work. Everybody benefits from it. But when there's a singular task that someone needs to do, it becomes incredibly difficult because there's no added benefit or incentive to necessarily do the action, because everyone's going to benefit just as much as the person who takes ownership and does it. Mm. And so when you think about going first as that volunteer dilemma, that's heavy.
Yeah, because at that moment in time, all the risk is yours.
Yes.
And the reward is for everybody.
Yes.
But I might not actually get to experience that reward. Yeah. But honestly, I think just like there are people that in those moments in time, they're not thinking about their inaction. Mm-hmm. The people that act, I think a lot of times, they're not thinking about their action.
They just
just, and I have no scientific basis for this whatsoever. I did zero research. This is just me thinking about life experiences and being in this industry that we're in, where I've been around a lot of high-speed people, and they have a certain kind of mindset and mentality.
Yeah.
And when shit goes sideways, they act. It's not this long drawn out process, and that's who they are.
I'm going to put all of that together.
Okay.
I mean, like every episode we've done up until this, with what you just said, into one little thing. Sweet. And this idea is mostly, I would say, from Darren Hardy, which kind of crazy when we're talking about like high speed, whatever. And now I'm going to look at somebody who's very much like, let's run businesses. Let's be great people and entrepreneurs. Right. But he talks about creating behaviors in that you and your past self and your past self and your past self and your past self are all different people. So if you are, the habits you have, those repeated actions by your past self are almost bystanders to who you are now. It's part of why habits are so difficult to break. And the example to kind of wrap your mind around this that I'd like to give is you're staring at a Starbucks, knowing full well you don't have time or money to stop. And you know that you don't really need the caffeine or the sugar, but you still walk through that door. And you could just say, well, willpower, you need to fight it. You need to not go in. But there's much more to it than that, because how many other times have you walked into that store knowing you didn't really need it, didn't really have time, didn't really have the money, but you got your drink. And even if you shouldn't have, you're happy and you get this serotonin kind of drop. Mm-hmm. So now you aren't fighting willpower. You're fighting your entire history of, I've gone in, I've gotten my drink, I've been happy. I've gone in, I've gotten my drink, I've gotten happy, whatever. And so now just because you have a new goal of losing weight or whatever it is, it's still really hard to not go do that. It's behavior, it's a habit, but it's your past selves as bystanders. Well, they all did it, and now I'm going to do it. Right. It's a similar idea. Yeah. If in your life you've acted, you have your past selves as bystanders for you. Right. You act.
Yeah. Yep. The whole Hard Ready program is kind of based on that idea. You think, I can literally not start my day without a cup of coffee. All right, well, guess what? For the next 2 weeks, you don't get to have coffee. And that, for some people, truly feels like the end of the world.
Torture.
It's literal torture. And well, we could say, well, caffeine is addictive, sugar is addictive, whatever. And I'm sure they are. I don't disagree with that at all. I don't think that's what it is, though. I think it's this emotional, habitual attachment to doing the thing, the process, that all of it leads to how I feel in that moment, that now I have this cup of coffee because it feels normal. It feels regular. This is what I do every day, that kind of thing. Yeah.
And we're back to feelings.
Yes.
Which are
dumb.
So stupid. Push those down. Ignore them. Don't worry about them.
They will ruin your life.
Before we end,
you think a shark gives a fuck about your feelings?
Should we talk about sharks?
No. We're against the clock.
Fair enough.
But we can do that next time because I'm here to talk about sharks.
I do want to loop back to a quote that you said, and we highlighted in another episode. Okay. This idea that where ignorance is mutual, confidence is king.
Yeah.
And there's a Charles Darwin quote that I'm guessing that one actually kind of stemmed from it. The Darwin quote is, "Ignorance more frequently begets confidence than does knowledge." Just kind of another call to like a Dunning-Kruger kind of an effect, a cognitive bias of sorts, where people with a limited competence in a certain domain tend to overestimate their abilities.
Oh, it never ceases to amaze me to see somebody comment on a thing with such confidence on social media. Mm-hmm. Such confidence. And one, it's something that's easily refutable. 9 times out of 10, they're saying the exact opposite of what's actually true. And then you go look at them, their profile, and they're commenting on, let's say, the socio-political climate in Ukraine, and they are in their day-to-day normal life, they're house builder.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with being a house builder,
nope. But
I'm pretty sure you commenting on Neil deGrasse Tyson's, post about
how stars are formed.
Yes. I think I know where I'm gonna, but they do it with such confidence.
Well, and that's this idea of feeling confident versus being confident. Yes. And within the violence space, within coaching people, we want people to be confident.
Yes.
Not just feel confident.
Yes. And that's hard because you have to get uncomfortable. We'll go back to previous episode. You have to be willing to admit, well, I'm not really confident right now. And it's going to be a process to get me there. And I think that's where having a good support group is important, because if we tie this back to the bystander effect, if you've got a lot of people around you, mm-hmm. because if we're taking our cues from society and the people close to us and whatever, I've got a lot of people around me that are working towards the same goal. They're going through the same kinds of things. They're going to run into the same kind of obstacles. I'm more likely to push through if other people in that room are also pushing through. If everybody in that room is quitting, I'm more likely to quit. So having a strong social support network is really, really important.
I love that you said that, because that cues up our next episode, which I'm not going to say here. You follow us on Instagram at Wife of Violence. Go to Twitter, Wife of Violence Pod, Wife of Violence Podcast on YouTube. We're all over the place. Go follow those things so you get our episode release, but that's going to come back around in the next episode.
Sweet.
But for now, that's our look at the bystander effect, the influence of inaction and action. If you didn't enjoy this podcast, keep it to yourself. Stay off of social media. Go on with your life as usual. If you did enjoy this discussion, please follow, share, subscribe, all the things. Give us stars. It really helps us.
All the stars.
All the stars. All the comments.
Not the comments.
Okay, no, not all the comments. But we'll take one word. Nice. That's totally fine. That's a great
I'm here for that.
Comment. We're here for it. We're good for it. Thanks for listening to Wife of Violence, and we look forward to growing with you next time.
Thanks, everybody.